737 Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to you, friends. Dan Mandis here, along with Johnny B., Ken Weaver, and also Congressman Andy Ogles joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. Congressman, always great to speak with you. Let's talk. I've got a whole list of questions. Let's get right to it. We have the House of Representatives passing the Israeli aid. It's going to be it was a $14.3 billion, and this is a standalone bill, so the Ukrainian aid is not included here. Of course, you have the Democrats in the Senate and Joe Biden also saying that this is dead on arrival. Biden says if it comes to his desk, he's going to veto it. So where does this go from here?
Well, we'll see if he has the backbone to actually do that. I mean, it's a good bill. What we did in the House was we can't spend any more money. So if you have money on the table that's already been appropriated and is either unused or shouldn't be spent, and what we did was we're pulling back money from the IRS. And I'm guessing most of your listeners would agree if there's an agency or department that should have some of its money taken away, it would be the IRS. We don't need another 87,000 agents. So you take that money, you pay for the Israel supplemental, and that way you keep your balance sheet the same. You just move some numbers around. And look, if Joe Biden doesn't want to support our largest ally in the Middle East, that's on him. But if he sends it back or the Senate sends it back with some gobbled up mess, we'll strip it apart and we'll send it back to him.
Let me ask you, do you think this would have been, because obviously you speak to these Democrats and you're right there in Washington, D.C., if this bill was basically, here's $13 billion for Israel, and it was not tied to the 87,000 IRS agents, do you think then it would pass, or are they just dead set on the Israeli funding has got to be tied to the Ukraine funding?
Well, I mean, I think there's 2 points. One, if it were standalone with no pay for, in other words, the IRS wasn't connected to it, they would have supported it overwhelmingly. And yes, I think that is something that they think is a leverage point, that if they tie Israel and Ukraine together, it'll help them pass more Ukraine spending. But look, you've got aides to the Ukrainian government that have come forward and said that the stealing in the graphs is so bad they can't even track it anymore. I mean, this is how absurd it is. And those are your dollars, those are my dollars, and we've got to know what our exit strategy is for Ukraine. What does peace look like, and where's the dang money going? So, and then there was just a Time.com article was talking about they've had such heavy losses of manpower now that even if we sent them all of the equipment that they have been promised, they don't have the manpower to operate the machinery or the weaponry. So it's a mess over there. But there's a big difference between Israel and what's going on in Ukraine, and because you can easily articulate why we have to support Israel. The Ukraine situation, that's a different conversation.
Well, it is a different conversation. I want to play for you, Johnny. I need some audio here. I want to play for you, Congressman, an audio bite that I've been obsessing over this morning. This is John Kirby, and he was talking about just what you're talking about, where a commander within Ukraine is saying that, they're not making the progress that the Biden administration or Vladimir Zelensky has been saying that they're making against Russia. And this is what John Kirby said.
Well, certainly we'll let Ukrainian leaders speak to their progress or lack thereof. That's really for them to talk about.
I mean, when John Kirby says, the Biden administration says, well, we'll let Ukraine talk about their, progress or lack thereof. That's not for us to say. Well, isn't it for us to say? Because we've given them $113 billion and we're on the hook for another 60.
Yeah, I mean, and you've got, I think don't hold me to this number, but I think the average age now of the Ukrainian military is around 43 years old. That's because they've lost an entire generation or 2 generations of people. They've burned through their 20 and 30-year-olds. So the average age is now 43. This is not a war that they, quite frankly, can keep up. Russia had planned this the whole way. And if you look at how they fight war historically, it's all about attrition through manpower. and they just throw wave after wave after wave of men at the battle lines. And in this case, Russia's just a much larger country, and there's been some tactical decisions. There's been mistakes made, and there's no point in litigating that. But that being said, I want to know what peace could look like. I want to know where the money's going. I want to know why we're there and what's our ROI. We have a southern border, and again, you kind of say this, tongue in cheek, but it's true. Before I secure someone else's border, I need to be worried about our own. And so one of the things I think you're going to see the White House try to do, and I actually still have a problem with this, is ties to the southern border to Ukraine to force us to vote for more aid for Ukraine. But in return, they'll do something on the southern border. The problem with that conversation is I don't trust this administration. If we simply enforce the laws we already have, we wouldn't have this migrant crisis. We wouldn't have this invasion. You wouldn't have almost 90,000 missing children, 90,000 unaccompanied minors that are missing in the system right now, if they would just follow the laws we already have. So we're going to trust them. It's kind of like Charlie Brown and Lucy, and every time he goes for the ball, she pulls it away. That's what the Biden administration does on the southern border. Every time they say they're going to do something, they pull the ball away, and they don't.
7:43 on Nashville's Morning News. Congressman Andy Ogles is joining us. So the $60 billion in Ukraine aid, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has said that he is open to, I don't know if I want to say he was supportive of, maybe you can give more intel, but he is open to passage of the $60 billion for Ukraine, but he wants some safeguards and some accountability. Now, you just basically said the same thing. What kind of safeguards or accountability or endgame are you looking for in order to vote for that money?
Yeah, I'm not convinced that we should vote for it, even with safeguards. So, if you were to, do a whip count, so you're going around asking members of Congress where they are today on a vote for additional aid for Ukraine, I would be a no, or at least a lean no. And so I just don't know that, again, it's not just about accountability. It's what might peace look like? You have Zelensky saying that he wants Crimea returned. Is that a realistic expectation? And that's not a conversation to have on the radio, but, it's one of those, what are the realistic expectations both from Russia and Ukraine, and can that be reconciled? And is that job our job, quite frankly, or is it more of Europe's job to figure that out? I think there's some fear up here that if you don't stop, kind of the Russian aggression, or if you just cede to them the land that they control, that whether it's in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, they'll ramp up again and they'll try to march through Ukraine and some of the other Baltic states. I don't necessarily know that I believe that when you look at their failures on the ground, quite frankly. How are they going to take Eastern Europe if they can't take Eastern Ukraine? So, again, let's zoom out. Let's get away from some of the kind of the fear mongering, if you will, and take a realistic assessment. And of course, everything's in context. We've got inflation problems. We've got spending problems. We've got a southern border problem. You've got a crisis in Israel that we can't walk away from. You've got an issue with China and Taiwan. We have bigger issues on the table that really should be taking the majority of our time. And, major on the major, don't major on the minor. And I don't want to disregard what's going on to the Ukrainian people. But, from our perspective, strategically, national security speaking, what's going on in Ukraine is a minor issue regarding, compared to all the other things that I mentioned.
Well, and Congressman, when you look at what's going on in Ukraine, and then you look at the progress that Israel is making against Hamas, Israel is certainly making inroads against Hamas. And so, that will be a segue to the next part of the conversation, which is I'm noticing that, President Biden and the Biden administration and some folks, maybe some Republicans too, they're getting a little squishy because the carnage there in Gaza is getting really bad. And one of the things that I'm noticing is the way that this is being, CNN just had it on earlier, where it's being positioned as, because of all of this carnage that Israel is causing, that now the Biden administration is going to start, if they haven't already, start pressuring Israel for a ceasefire. Of course, I'm not real surprised. I know that you wouldn't be either, but I'll ask you to comment on this. They should be positioning this as the carnage that Hamas is causing because they are utilizing all these folks as human shields. And so that's one of the big reasons why you have the carnage that you have. What say you?
Well, and it goes beyond that. When you have the Palestinian government, they have a pay-to-slay program, meaning that some of the money. And I think about this: we give aid, Europe gives aid to the Palestinians. Some of that money gets literally siphoned off for Hamas, but the government itself sponsors terrorism. We know this. They have a pay-to-slay program, meaning if you're a Palestinian, you're willing to martyr yourself to kill someone from Israel or America or Europe, they're going to pay your family. And so the Palestinian government has harbored Hamas. They have harbored terrorists now for 20 years. This is the price you pay for being in bed with terrorists. And so, and it should also be noted that, Jordan does not want any of the Palestinians because they're a radicalized people. Egypt does not want the Palestinians because they are radicalized people. And so Israel has a right to exist. They have a right to live without fear. So that means that you've got to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. I'm sorry if that offends any of your listeners, but it's true. When you've seen some of the things that I've seen that took place over there, where they cut off an 8-year-old girl's arm, and then they just left her alone to bleed to death. They put a baby, after killing the father, brutally assaulting, gang assaulting, and I'm using my word carefully there, the mother, yep, while they put her baby in the oven and they cooked it. I mean, this is what was happening at the hands of the Palestinians and Hamas. There can be no mercy. We wouldn't allow that to exist on our border. We wouldn't allow that to encroach into our country, and nor should Israel. And so I'm sorry, it's going to get messy. But when you've harbored terrorists for 20 years, the only way you get rid of that, and I don't know if this number's entirely accurate, but Hamas claims they have 300 miles of tunnels.
Yep.
You've got to flood every foot of those tunnels. You got to run the rats out of the tunnels. And then you have to do what you do to rats. You exterminate them.
Right. And Congressman Ogles, I've spoken with a couple of experts who have said that the 300 miles of tunnels, that is accurate. And you're right. And, I don't think we have to worry about our listeners being offended by what you said about wiping Hamas off the face of the earth. I think we are all pretty much of the same mindset that, yes, we do need to give Israel the room to let them do what they need to do. And it is so frustrating because how quickly, the Democrats and Joe Biden, it's not surprising Biden is forgetting, but how quickly they forget that on, the days after the horrific attack on October 7th, they were all of one mind saying that, absolutely, we need to give Israel the room and the space to do what they need to do. And now, not even a month later, you have the Democrats waffling. And this is the weakness that Joe Biden and the Democrats show. And this is why things like this actually happen. Congressman, we've got 30 seconds left, 45 seconds left. What are we going to see next week as far as what's happening in the House of Representatives?
Yeah, we'll continue to, I openly support Israel. I've got legislation there to prevent Palestinians from coming to the United States because, again, you would be inviting terrorists into our homeland. And you're going to continue to see us working our appropriations bills. There is a continuing resolution that's on the horizon. So I was with the speaker yesterday. He's a friend, but we had a meeting and we were talking about a CR, what that might look like and what's the path forward. But we've got to avoid a government shutdown at this point. And we have to avoid the Senate sending us a $2 trillion omnibus bill in December.